Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I'm honored to have Justin Prince with me. Justin is the author of Be the One. He also is an entrepreneur and has done billion-dollar deals of sales. And so one of the quotes I'm really excited to highlight, and I think we're going to hear a lot about it in Justin's story, is I learned from my failures that failure is not final. Failure is part of the process and the fertilizer of success. So Justin, thanks so much for being on today, my man.
Man, Phil, thanks for having me, brother. Congrats on the podcast and honored to meet you.
Absolutely. So to start your story, as a young man, your parents got a divorce around 12 years old. And I think,
hmm
one, that's an emotional event to happen in anyone's life, but certainly at that age where you're kind of, trying to figure out who you are and, all those different things. So talk a little bit about just that season of life and kind of the impact on you at that point.
Yeah, it's interesting. As I think back at that time, I was my mom's oldest. My dad had two older children, my older sister, older brother, and so they moved in with my dad. So I was now the oldest at home.
Yeah.
And I remember I was sitting in, it would have been my seventh grade year. I was sitting in class at the beginning, the fall of seventh grade. I'm in math class and the teacher's talking. And I remember I wasn't like listening to things this guy was saying. I was like daydreaming, looking out the window. And I was having this like conversation with myself. And
Mm.
if you've ever seen like those cartoons that have like a little devil on one shoulder and like a little angel on one shoulder,
Yeah.
the little devil was like whispering in my ear. It's like, hey, you can do whatever you want now. Like you can like drink alcohol, you can do drugs, you can have sex with
Mm.
girls, you can like never go to school. And like for the rest of your life, you can blame it on your parents. Like this happened at this
Wow.
tough time.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's a good point. And those all sound interesting. And then they had this little angel on the other shoulder. It's like, listen, you can do all those things, but it said you have to live the life that you create. I just
Mm.
like kind of like like you can blame your parents even, but you're still living within the life that you're creating.
Uh,
And I was like, oh, that's a good point too. And luckily, unfortunately, I chose like the good angel, right? The good little angel saying, go create it, your own life. And some of those early decisions, I think, help you kind of just grow up. You basically grow up just a little bit fast, right? You just accelerate your maturing process. And man, I look at that now, and I think those are pivotal times. Like I even talk with my kids, like you want to rid yourself of all entitlement. Don't whine, blame, complain, make excuses, blame other people for what's happening. You want to take ownership of your life, make decisions, make commitments, set a direction, live an intentional life, and like move in an intentional, way. And so some of those things started just even in those early times, kind of trying to navigate all of the emotions of your folks, divorcing.
Yeah. Now, something it sounded like maybe basketball and sports became an important piece of your life. And so, talk a little bit about that. I think, sports can be a really good outlet to, one, just for pure energy, but two, to, find a healthy way to get, attention or to find camaraderie and teamwork, opposed to some of those maybe other life choices that, hey, if I didn't have a sporting event, I might have more free time and make some more rambunctious decisions.
Yeah, no, great question. Sports was a huge part of my life growing up. So,
Yeah.
um, my basketball career, I went from being Shaq in like the fifth grade to basically Charles Barkley in the seventh grade to Muggsy Bogues in the ninth grade. So I was like I reversed aged, I reverse grew, but I was really big as a kid. I kind of matured
Yeah.
faster than everybody else. I'm probably 5'9", 5'10", and I was probably 5'9", 5'10" in like whatever seventh grade or something. So
Yeah.
I was just wrecking everybody, and then like my friends all grew, and I was Muggsy Bogues now, and played competitively all over the country, kind of through the AAU circuit.
Yeah.
Played, in high school as in ninth grade, and just so you kind of got into it. And then I blew my shoulder out at a church. It was like a church summer camp. It's back then it was called EFY, especially for youth. It was like a youth summer camp. So
Yeah.
I was up at Utah State University, and I was trying to show off for these two girls. They had yeah, just they had this big
Naturally.
auditorium, and the teacher goes, "Can anyone do a handstand push-up?" And I never actually tried a handstand push-up, but I could do push-ups. You know, I was kind of strong little guy, and I was like, I can do it. And the two girls were in the audience, and I was like, I gotta show them how cool I am. So I walked down and I went to do a handstand push-up. I didn't even know how to do a handstand, so I fell over the first time. And I told the guy, I said, "Hey, will you grab my legs?" He goes, "Okay." So I go down and I'm trying to push up like this, and my shoulder just goes plunk like that,
Oh,
and just pops out. And so my one arm was like, you know, this much longer than the other arm. And I said to the guy, I go, I think I just blew I think my shoulder just popped out. And he goes, go sit down. You know, just thought I was being just kind of sarcastic 15-year-old kid. Like, no, for reals. I think it did. And he touches right here, and where you have like that bone that was just all mush, you know, he's like, oh crap. He's like, you got to talk to a nurse, you know? So anyway, playing a high school basketball game, I did a pass and it popped out. So subluxation popped out, popped in.
Hmm.
Anyway, that got me into lifting weights
Yeah.
when I was 15 years old. 'Cause I'd always been kind of a strong kid, just for kind of like naturally, let's call it. And then my dad's like, listen, you got to like get into like fitness. And by the way, fitness has been a huge part of my life. You know, I basically lifted weights or worked out 4 to 5 days a week. We were talking before we started the podcast. We're both kind of routine kind of
Yeah.
people, you know, habits and routines. I've lifted 4 to 5 days a week for 28 years in a row, you know, so just this is part of my life now.
Yeah.
And so when I was 15, I started working out, and I remember I went to a basketball camp up in Washington State. It was for point guards. It was like a point guard camp.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was going to go through a screen. I had a cutoff t-shirt on. I was going to go through this guy's screen, and I remember thinking to myself, I'm not going to go through like around the screen. I'm just going to like go through this dude's chest, you know?
Yeah.
I just was like, he's never going to want to set a screen again on me ever again. And I kind of like hunched down and I flexed my arm and my shoulder to like explode in this dude's chest. And the guy he is like this. He's like, no, thanks, you know? I remember thinking, I was like, I'm playing the wrong sport, you know? I should be
Yeah.
in football, you know? And my grandpa played college football. My dad played college football.
Hmm.
And I was like, man, maybe I need to get in football. So football kind of took over at that point. But I used to box. I trained with Gene Fulmer and his two brothers. So Gene Fulmer was a super middleweight champion of the world in the 50s.
Wow.
He actually beat Sugar Ray Robinson, who some people would argue Sugar Ray Robinson's the greatest of all time, is certainly one of the top five. And Gene's brother Jay was top 10, and Don was the number one contender. So the Fighting Fulmer family are just legends, you know.
Yeah.
So I trained with them for a couple years, and then I did track. And so sports and athletics and competition and teamwork and learning to get up after you get knocked down and learning to create private victories. Stephen Covey teaches private victories. So he says, you know, your public victories are what you're celebrated for in public. People see, you know, they see when you win the championship, right?
Yeah.
Or in business or whatever the case might be. The private victories are all the preparation that you do when in essence, the only person that sees it is you, right?
Yeah.
Like my girls are 16 and 14, and they're in drill for their school. It's basically like the dance.
Yeah.
And these girls work so hard. It's incredible how hard these drill girls work and how much energy and effort they put into this. But I tell my girls, I say, everyone shows up for practice and everyone can show up for the competitions. I admire watching them at night when they just keep doing their turns and keep doing their moves.
Yeah.
When it's just them, you know, just over and over and over and over, all of the private victories. And Covey says we're celebrated in public for what we do in private. And so those private victories are taught to you in sports. If you really want to get great, and this is true of all the key areas of life, if you really want to get great, it's getting great in all the private areas, you know, where you're just as good in private as you are in public, and vice versa.
I love that. Now, for you, kind of venturing out of the sports realm and into working years, you started doing some construction and delivery of pizza. And, you know, I don't know if that was out of necessity of money or if that was just, hey, you know, it's something that I can get started with as long as I'm willing, able, and capable. But talk a little bit about, you know, the beginning of the working career for Justin.
Yeah. So, you know, this was not exactly like high skilled labor. So my dad has worked my whole life in basically in real estate. So in either land development or home building.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, you know, one of the things I look back now, it's funny. I tease my dad that like the child labor laws, hopefully like the statute of limitations are like over now. But when I was 8 years old, he would drive me to the subdivisions. So imagine it's one of those subdivisions where it's been ground, you know, it's kind of been leveled off. the weeds and stuff have been leveled off, preparing for lots to be built on.
Yeah.
And some of the houses are framed, but there's not homes everywhere, right?
Mm.
So it's just a construction site at this point. And I was what they called the gopher. I'd go for this, go for that, go for this. So I'd pick up the spare pieces of wood and throw them in the garbage, or I would sweep out the house, and as they had sawdust or whatever, just kind of menial labor works like that. I didn't have a saw and a hammer, and I wasn't learning a skill. I was 8 years old, and my dad would in the summer, he would drop me off at 8 in the morning and pick me up at 5 at night on the way home. And I would work the whole time. He'd give me a little bit of money for like they had the truck that drives by and you get some food.
Yeah.
And man, it taught you some work ethic, because it's summertime and you're just out there with a bunch of construction workers. Geez Louise. And but it taught me how to work. He instilled in me the ability to actually know how to work. So I did that with the pizza. One of my buddies that I play basketball with, his dad owned a place called Papa Murphy's Take and Bake Pizza. So for those of you that have heard of this, they don't even bake it. You got to figure that thing out. So you just go buy like an unbaked pizza and figure it out at your house.
Yeah.
And so my rule with my dad, his rule with me was, if I was in sports, he would count that as my job, if you will, right? But if I wasn't in sports, then I would have to go get a job. And I remember one night we lost our last game on a Thursday night, and I cried tears. I mean, it's just devastating. Season ended, or like, oh my gosh, I was probably, I was a sophomore year, so sad that, and I thought he'd give me at least the weekend to sulk in my sorrows,
Yeah.
until Monday I had to get a job. No, dude, Friday after school, I was making pizzas,
Yeah.
and again, it just taught me, taught me this work ethic, So I didn't even deliver them. I just made them, and everyone else had to figure it out from there. So I started there, and then that ultimately led me into a sales career. So I did some mission work for my church. Got home. I'm home, driving home from the airport. My older brother, my family's there to pick me up. I drove home with my older brother, and he says to me as we're driving home, he goes, "Do you want a job?" I mean, I've been home 9 minutes. I'm like, "Yeah, dude, sure." And he says, "Remember these Bible videos we used to watch when we were little kids? There was these like animated Bible videos." And I was like, "Yeah, I think so." And he goes, "Well, I had a friend that sells those, and he makes X amount of money." By the way, I think he said the guy made $150,000. I had no concept or frame of reference for money. So if he could have said the guy made $1 million or $1 billion or $5, I just had like no frame of reference what it even all meant. And I was like, cool. So the next day I got a job and started an all commission sales job. So if you sold, you made $1. If you didn't sell, you didn't make $1.
Yeah.
And there's almost like an entrepreneurial ladder that I think we go on. The lowest rung of the ladder. When I say the lowest, it's not. There's nothing wrong with it, other than imagine this is a freedom ladder, right?
Yeah.
If you're trying to become economically free. Lowest rung would be dollar per hour. That's what I did at pizza, and that's what I did at construction. I think I made $5.25 at the pizza place. Like, per hour, I would exchange the hour, make $5.25. So you can only make so much because there's only so many hours in the day, and you can improve your skills, maybe go to $6 or $8, or maybe now it's $15 or $20, whatever the case might be, but you can only make so much.
Yep.
The next rung up would be what I would call a salary. A salary is what a company is willing to pay you so that you won't go pursue your bigger dreams. They're basically like, hey, we'll pay you this much money to stick with us, right?
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with it. But you're going to be building their dreams versus building your own dreams. It's all good. Next rung up would be all commission. And I put all commission higher than salary. The reason why is because in all commission, it's hyper risky, because if you sell nothing, you make nothing. But if you become highly skilled, man, in all commission, maybe one year you make 50, another year you can make it 100. If you get really good, you make 200. If you get really good, you make 500. Like, in other words, you can make more as you become more highly skilled.
Yes.
Next level up would be basically business ownership, so dividends, where the business is paying you dividends. And then the highest level on a freedom ladder is what's called asset-based income. So in other words, it's income that's generating cash for you, even if you're not exchanging time or effort. And man, that's a happy day, right? So
Yeah.
I started at the lowest rung of that, and kind of worked my way up. But that freedom ladder is kind of the way you want to be thinking of, like, where am I at in that, and what could I do to kind of, maybe if your goal is to become financially independent, financially free, to keep moving up that ladder.
Yeah. Now, one thing I want to tie into that is, taking, like you said, there's a risk, right, with not having a salary. There is a risk there because you're betting on yourself, but you're also betting on yourself. So talk a little bit about, maybe some of the lessons learned from sports, the getting knocked down and having to
Yeah.
get back up, and how that parlayed into maybe having a sense of confidence in the realm of sales, even though maybe you weren't necessarily a salesman, going into it or having a lot of previous experience.
Yeah. Yeah. This is one of the reasons I love sports,
Yeah.
is sports teach us so many life lessons. So I loved basketball and football, for example, because they taught you teamwork, right? You had to work together as a team. You had to learn how to pass. You had to learn how to block. You had to learn how to encourage other people, how to be basically a good member of an overall team. I loved boxing because, man, there's something about like you're in the red corner and they're in the blue corner and like no one else is there.
Yeah.
It's just like,
Yeah.
oh, geez. And by the way, they're trying to punch you in the face as hard as they can. You're like, what is happening right now? It goes against kind of like your human. If there's a human part of you that's like, wow, this is intimidating.
Yeah.
And but man, it also you have to really rely on those skills, and you have to put in the work because you'll run out of like gas. I mean, your wind, you'll run out of air if you don't learn how to like run the miles.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing about sports for me is sports teach you. You mentioned this as we kind of started the discussion. Sports teach you how to fail.
Mm.
Sports teach you how to lose.
Yeah.
And failure is not in a person; it's an event. So you're not a failure. You failed. And failure is not final, it's fertilizer. And your success will grow in the fertilizer of failure. What happens for a lot of us is that we feel like, man, if we fail, like we're we're toast, right? That's
Yeah.
it. Listen, you want to learn how to adjust and adapt rapidly to failure. Like, what did I learn? What did I learn? It's kind of like a win or learn versus
Mhm.
win or lose. It's kind of a win or learn. And when you learn something, you adjust and adapt and go again, adjust and adapt, go again, adjust and adapt, go again, you improve. And by doing that, you really never actually lose because you're just learning things that don't work. Edison had the famous quote. He said they said that it took almost 1,000 different tries and attempts. He basically failed 1,000 times trying to invent electricity, invent the light bulb. He goes, that's not, he goes, I didn't fail 1,000 times. He goes, I just learned 1,000 ways not to do it.
Yeah.
That's a great that's a great perspective of how to think about failure. And that's one of the things that sports teach you. You lost that play, you just got
Yep.
scored on, or, whatever it is. You lost that play. There's momentum shifts in sports.
Mhm.
And so learning how to keep showing up with high levels of intensity, keep showing up high levels of focus, keep showing up with high levels of discipline to like the plan, the game plan,
Yes.
etc. With regardless of how the wind's blowing in the game,
Yeah.
or in the season, or you got benched, or you're not playing as much as you thought, or you feel like the other guy's not as good as you, or you feel like you go through all of those different
Yeah.
kind of micro emotions, and those are the same macro things that can change your whole life if you learn how to discipline your disappointments and walk through that stuff.
I love it. Now, speaking of a disappointment, as a young man post sales, you decide to start a business, and the business doesn't end up going as maybe you would have hoped it would have gone, and so you have a learning opportunity. So, talk a little bit about taking the risk to start your own business, what it was, and ultimately some of the things you learned, maybe not to do again in a future business.
Yeah, no, great question. So, it's so interesting. I remember I came home one time when I was in sales. I hadn't sold for multiple shifts. And I came home and I was literally living at home still. I told my wife, or I told my mom, pardon me. I said to her, I was just so discouraged and so frustrated and so ready to give up. And I go, I suck at sales. And she goes,
Mm.
no, honey, you don't. I'm sure you just had it. I go, Mom, I suck at sales. And I remember I'm like throwing my bag down, just being so negative. And I remember I said, I just want to go work a job where they pay me, I know what I'm going to make per hour. It doesn't matter what. And I just thought, man, think of that story that I was telling myself, this
Yeah.
identity, like I suck at sales and I just want to work an hourly job. These are all identity. Success is an identity process. So I remember when I first started my first business, one of the biggest challenges I had was creating a new identity. Like I'm a business owner versus I'm an
Yeah.
entrepreneur versus a salesperson.
Mm.
And so you go through that whole thing of like, who do you think you are? And you kind of go through the, kind of the, uh, uh, kind of the, what is that key, that term, right? When you say, who am I to do this? Right.
Yeah.
And you start thinking, and it's not entitlement, it's imposter, pardon me, the
Yeah.
imposter
Imposter
syndrome,
syndrome.
right?
Yeah.
Like, who do I think I am to do this? And then I also thought, what if I do this and I go for it and I really try hard and people know I'm doing it and I talk about it and then I fail?
Mm,
Oh my gosh, it's just like the fear of failure was just loomed so large, you know? Anyway,
yeah,
long story short, got past all of that and I got enough courage to go for it. I was like, come on, freaking go make this thing happen
yeah,
and go for it. And I'm paying the price and I'm trying to make it happen. And I'm trying to, add value at a high level, the whole thing. Long story short, the business itself fails. So the company that we were distributing their products for, the kind of the parent company
yeah.
that was supplying us the products, et cetera, they went out of business.
Mm,
And so like one day we were in business, next day we weren't, and it was decisions that were basically outside of our, kind of control. And I
right.
remember getting the call. I remember having like grown man tears rolling down my face. Like your income's just toast. It's just gone. And oh, it's just painful. And, I absolutely thought to myself, I remember thinking, I was like, dude, screw this business stuff. I'm
Yeah,
out. I'm not
yeah,
doing business anymore. I'm going to go get a normal job, a normal career, be more in control of like have someone else fail and then I fail, the whole thing.
right.
And wealth is hidden to those that have to do it all themselves.
Mm,
So wealth is hidden to those that have to do it all themselves. If you say, I'm just going to keep all the control myself, wealth is hidden to people, with that mentality, because you ultimately have to create leverage where you're working as a team. You're creating an environment where it's not just all about what you can do, your own efforts. And so I finally got enough courage to start another business. And I thought I would just, take the experience. This is over a period of a couple of months where I kind of build up enough courage to go again.
yeah,
And I thought I was just going to crank on this thing. Like I was just like going to, in 2 weeks, I'd be kind of, have enough revenue coming in. No, it took me 2 years. And at one point
yeah,
we had to move my pregnant wife and our two kids into the loft of my wife's parents' garage. So I have two part-time jobs enough to make some money. I'm still trying to build this entrepreneurial business. My kids are sleeping in the closet. My wife and I sleep in this little loft area. I'm 27 years old. I'm a grown man. I live in the United States of America. And I'm like, what am I doing with my life? I freaking
yeah,
am sucking this thing up. So those were all great lessons and great teachers of learning how to become more resilient.
yeah,
Resiliency asks two great questions that leaders ask. The two questions are how far and how long. Question one, how far am I going to fall when negativity hits? Question number two is how long am I going to stay down?
mm,
So the first one is a depth question. The second one is a duration question. So think of it this way. Negativity hits. By the way, I want to point out when negativity hits. It's not an
yes,
if it's going to hit it. You're
yeah,
going to go through, you guys know how life is. You go through challenges, you go through ups, you go through downs, through different seasons. So when it hits, how far are you going to fall?
mm,
Like, are you going to fall like on a scale of 1 to 10? Are you going to fall to 2 or are you going to fall to 10? You just
yeah,
hit rock bottom, boom. And one of the ways you can say, how am I growing as a leader? How am I growing as a person? Number one, how far do I fall? And then how big of obstacles can pull me down?
mm,
Because
mm-hmm,
the bigger the person, the bigger the problem it takes to really knock them off their stride.
yeah,
Second question is, if you're going to go down, the second question is, how long are you going to stay down? So it's a
yeah,
duration question. And you and I have both met people, Phil, that let's say they went through some really real life, no kidding stuff, right? So
mm-hmm,
bankruptcies, divorces, addictions, just the whole gamut of life, right? Real
yeah,
pains.
yeah,
So I'm not minimizing the realness of what they experience. So they go through it and they hit rock bottom.
yeah,
Now we both know people like that hit rock bottom, but then today you're like, man, they got a great marriage and like their finances are in order and their spiritual life's in order. Like they're like, in other words, they bounce back. We
yeah,
also know people that have hit rock bottom that are still at rock bottom 6 months, 6 years, 60 years later. So
yes.
the question is both how far am I going to fall and then how long am I going to stay down? You want to get good at bouncing back up.
I love that. Now, I was going to do this later, but I think we'll tie it in now. It's perfect timing. The story we all hear, or kind of talk to ourselves, and we wonder sometimes, is you see siblings that grew up in the exact same dynamic, right? And one goes on to have X, Y, and Z success. One ends up who knows where, and you say, how is it possible that you're from the same gene pool, you saw the same things? And their answer is, well, because I saw this, right? And one made decisions to try and never live that way again. The other said, well, my decisions justify it, or justified because of where I came from. And you've met somebody Mr. E9400 that has, just kind of a wild story where his life could have went, I mean,
Yeah.
multitude of ways, but two drastically different ones would be easily, conjured in our heads. And he picked a different way. So talk a little bit about that
Yeah.
story, and just the impact that that's had on you.
Yeah. So to your first point, I heard there was basically there was an interview process done. It was kind of like a study done of two twin brothers,
Yeah.
and the father of the family situation, the parents in and out of jail, drugs, just having a rough go. The one son is in jail. He's struggled with drugs, the whole thing. And they say to the son, they said, "How did you end up here?" And he says, "Isn't it obvious?" He goes, "Look at where I came from."
Yeah.
They said to the other son, who's a Fortune 500 company executive, just living a kind of a great life, great family, the whole thing. They said, "How did you end up here?" And he says, "Isn't it obvious?" He goes, "Look at where I came from." And it was a real situation, right? It was,
Yeah.
to your point,
Yeah.
it was like they we don't see the world as the world is, we see the world as we are. And so they
Mm,
just made different decisions of what all of this stuff meant. The
yeah.
story was different with each person. So I have a buddy of mine I worked with years ago. He lives in Southern California named Jaime Molina. Phil, to give you an idea, Jaime is one of the sweetest guys you'll ever meet. He's just a really amazing guy. He's the kind of guy you'd want your kids to date, your girls to date. He's just a great guy. Married to his wife, Ramona. They have a beautiful marriage. He has 4 beautiful daughters. He works in the financial services industry. One of the things that he does in his community just to kind of give back is he works with the troubled youth. And he tells them a story about a man named E9400. E9400 was born in Texas, El Paso on the border of Mexico and the States. At age 8, this little boy was given alcohol and introduced to alcohol, started consuming alcohol regularly. At age 9, he was sexually molested by someone 23 years older than him. Just as a little boy, became sexually active. At age 14, was introduced to hard drugs. At 15, was a mule for the cartels. And at 22, was sentenced with 11 felonies to San Quentin, one of
Mm,
the roughest jails in America.
yeah.
And Jaime tells the story of these kids and goes, "Let me ask you a question." He goes, "Where do you think E9400 ended up? Is he dead? Is he alive? Is he homeless? Is he living his best life? Is he strung out on drugs? Is he an alcoholic? Like, what do you think the odds are?"
Yeah.
And I think any of us, hearing, man, age 8, you're, consistently consuming alcohol. 9, you're sexually molested. 14, you're on hard drugs. 15, a mule. Then you're in San Quentin. I think any of us would be like, yikes, this is not, the odds of this are not high, right?
Yeah.
So one of the days he walks into the class and he said, "I have a special guest for you guys today." And the kids are like, "Who's that?" And he goes, "It's E9400. He's out in the hallway." And the kids are like, "The guy that you told us about?" No kidding. So they're,
Yeah.
they're kind of all on the edge of their seats. He walks out to grab him. He walks in and the door shuts behind him and it's just Jaime. He walks to the front of the room and he says, "I am E9400.
Mm,
E9400 was Jaime's prison number when he was at San Quentin. And for many years of his life, he was his identity, literally his identification was E9400. And what you want to remember is you're not who you are who you were born to be, because you are not what you did, you are what you repeatedly do. So in other words, the mistakes that you've made, those don't have to define you forever, because you get to choose new habits, new patterns, new routines of what you repeatedly do that shape into who you're born to be. You are your potential. Jaime wasn't born to be E9400. Jaime was born to be Jaime Molina,
yeah.
the father to these 4 beautiful daughters, the husband to Ramona, the man that runs this great financial services business, the man that works in is devout in his Catholic faith, that works with the kids in the troubled youth program. Jaime is one of the sweetest, neatest men. You'd never know
Yeah.
that Jaime at one point in his life was E9400, because of who he was born to be was greater than those challenges and mistakes and pains that he had been through.
Now, as you say that, part of that story makes me think back to you sitting at, 12 years old in class, right? You got the angel and the devil and the decisions, right? That you then decide to make. But the second part that I, want you to speak of, just maybe in your experiences or to someone listening that's going through this, is we've all made mistake or not mistakes, but decisions that we probably wouldn't make a second time, right? If we were in a different circumstance or we knew how things would play out. And at the same token, you holding on to that, at some point it doesn't serve you anymore,
Mm-hmm.
right? For a little while, it helps you learn and maybe it helps you make different decisions in the future. But if it's something that's weighing you down or bringing down what you view as your self-worth, or if you're constantly surrounded by people that are bringing up those things and they're not letting you move past it, that can be hard and it can start to make you think, I am that, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not something that happened. That is who I am. So, what's your encouragement of how to, one, kind of self correct your thoughts, but two, maybe if you're in an environment where people aren't letting you, move past that, how to kind of move on because your group is so important.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's two important questions there, and
Yeah.
I want to address both of them. I wrote a book called Be the One.
Yes.
And the premise of the book is, number one, that you're already the one. Success is an identity process. You understand who you really are. You're the one. So if you take your parents, your grandparents, your great grandparents, if you go back 12 generations was 4,094 people. 4,094 people from all over the world came together to create you. You are
Wow.
the one. You're the
Yeah.
one that they lived for and bled for, cried for and died for, give everything that they had for was for you. And then the second part is not to become the one. You already are the one. It's to be. Be is a present state. It's a present word. It's a present moment to be the one you were born to be. So, two quick thoughts. The first one is I teach in the book. I'm going to teach share two frameworks I teach in the book. The first one is a 3D vision. A 3D. So imagine like a 3D printer, right? It can hit it from all different angles. 3D vision. I'll go quick through this. First one is you want to define your vision. You want to like have a dream, have a goal, like have it defined. Brendan Burchard wrote a book called High Performance Habits, biggest study of high performers in history. They said that when they tapped a high performer on the shoulder, so Phil, if I were to tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, what's your latest dream? What's your latest goal? A high performer can answer that question 7 to 10 seconds faster than the rest of us.
Mm.
Why? It's because high performers have defined the dream. They've defined the vision. They've defined what they're looking to accomplish.
Yeah.
So the first thing is most people drift, right? So like life just sort of
Yeah.
happens. They just kind of end up sort of where they ended up. You
Yeah.
want to like define a vision of like, this is what I want to accomplish in my faith, in my fitness, in my marriage, in my business or my career. In all these kind of key areas of my life, this is what I want to go do. You define this stuff, right? Number two, and in the book, I teach you a bunch of strategies on how to do this. Number two is you want to declare it. You want to declare the vision. You don't want to keep visions a secret. Now, here's the challenge. Sometimes you might be in an environment right now, and I have been in similar environments where when you declare it, people are going to make fun of you. I've spoken all over the world. So in Asia, they say that there's an old proverb, says the nail that sticks up shall be hammered down.
Mm.
In Australia and through the United Kingdom, they say that the poppy flower that grows up, the tall poppy flower that grows will be hammered down or will be sliced down.
Yeah.
And in back east in the United States, if there's a crab in a bucket that's trying to crawl out, guess what they do? They put a second crab in the bucket. Why? You would think the second crab would kind of, push it on out of there, right? No, what happens? The second crab pulls it down.
Yeah.
So when you go for your dreams, you go for your goals, you try and stand out, maybe and really be the one in your life. Guess what's going to happen? You're going to get hammered, sliced, and pulled down. It's part of what happens to all people that try and go for it. So one of the things I teach in the book is you want to give more weight to the words of those that believe in you versus weight to the words of those that don't. So let me give you an example.
Love it.
The words themselves actually are neutral. Now, words absolutely have power. I cite a whole bunch of studies in the book, both from Harvard and Georgetown, about the power of words. But
Yeah.
the words themselves are neutral, meaning if a 3-year-old walks up to you and says, you're stupid, you're going to fail. Does it hurt? Well, I mean, maybe, but not really. You're more just like, all right, dude, whatever. Like, where's your mom? If a 33-year-old walks up to you and says, you're stupid and you're going to fail, it stings and it's like a dagger. If you do a post and you get 18 comments and 17 of them say, hey man, that's a great post. Thank you so much. And one of them says, you're an idiot and this is the stupidest post I've ever seen. We stew on the one post versus the 17 posts, right?
Yeah.
We stew on the words of the person that says, you're going to fail. We start to own that as an identity. And what I want to share with you or what I want to encourage you to think about is, what if you gave more weight to the words of those that believe in you versus those that don't? So I had a friend of mine that sat next to former 2-time President Ronald Reagan at a National Charity Awards dinner. And he's sitting next to him. They're eating. They're at a bit. This big. They're up on the stand. There's round tables. It's like a big charity event. And my friend says to President Reagan, he says, how did you become the president of the United States?
Yeah.
And he says, when I was a kid, he said, I wanted to play football. He said, I told some friends, I want to be a football player on the high school team. And his friends started laughing. And I go, Ron, you're going to get killed out there. You're just a little guy, And he said, I ultimately played high school football. He said, I listened to those who believed in me, and I listened to those who told me that I could. He said, when I was a high school football player, I told some friends, you know what? I want to become uh, a, uh, a famous actor, like move to Hollywood and become an actor. And his friends are like, Ron, what do you know about acting? You're a football player. He ultimately became a famous actor, moved to Hollywood, became an actor. We say, when I was an actor, I told some friends, I want to like become the governor of the state of California. And they're like, Ron, you're an actor. What do you know about politics and being a governor?
Yeah.
He ultimately became the governor of the state of California. When he was a governor, he said, I want to become the president of the United States. And he had some friends who were like, Ron, you don't even know anything about that. You're a governor. What do you know about becoming a president? He said, I ultimately became a two-term president of the United States. He said, I listened to those who believed in me, and I listened to those who told me that I could. That's the secret. Give more weight to the words of those that believe in you. And you know what's also interesting, Phil? So you might be in an environment right now where you're not around anyone that really believes in you. That's the power of even conversations like this.
Yeah.
You know, like you're plugged in this case, you're plugged into Phil's podcast. Why? Because there's other people who are saying, people like me, people like Phil, and others. There's books that can mentor you. There's podcasts that can mentor you. There's people that can say, listen, you got what it takes. You're
Yeah.
the one that 4,094 people from all over the world have lived and bled and died for. You are the one. Your life matters. Your life has value and purpose and meaning, and you recognize who you really are. So you declare the vision, and then third is you dedicate your life to it. Now you want to dedicate yourself to it. You know, most people are not very committed. You know, they're kind of in and out. You just want to remember there's no lukewarm winners. You're either in
Yeah.
or you're out. If you're in, be all in. If you're out, be all out. It's all good, but just go for it. And so if you're gonna, go for your dreams, go for them. Don't talk a big game. Just
Well,
be all about it. Thomas Monson said, stick to a task until it sticks to you. Beginners are many, finishers are few. You want to be a finisher. Dedicate yourself to stuff. Go make stuff happen. If you get knocked down, get back up. Why? Because you're dedicated to making it happen.
yeah.
You go figure things out. So you want to define your goals. You want to dedicate your life to your vision, and then you want to define it. You want to declare it, and then to go dedicate your life to it.
Well, and I think even to that, the question that you said, the how long and how far, almost goes to that last part of dedication as well, just in a different context, right? Like, how long will you stick with
Yeah.
something when it's not going well, and how
Yes.
far out of your comfort zone will you go to get yourself to a level of success? Now, Justin, with your story, and once again, I wish we had 9 hours because we could unpack so much, but the thing I want to leave off with is, you mentioned you wrote the book, and part of the neatness of that book is that it has a foreword by a guy named John Maxwell, who anyone that has probably ever heard anything that's personally developed is some deviation from
Yeah.
John himself.
Yeah.
But talk a little bit about just how you got connected with John and the Maxwell team, and just a little bit about your partnership there.
Yeah, John, man, he let me start by telling you he's better behind the scenes than you would even hope that he would be.
Yeah.
So in other words, he's that good of a man. John's a really he's as good, if not better, than you would hope that he is. So remember, I when I was selling in my all commission sales days, I went to it was basically like a fair, but it was, probably 4 or 5 hours away from where I lived. And I drove to this fair to sell this product. I remember driving home. I didn't sell anything, super frustrated, just like, gosh dang, I wanted to quit. It was so interesting. I look over at my passenger uh, seat, and there's a CD series. This is back in the day we had CD series, right?
Yeah.
There's a CD series, an audio book series from a guy named John Maxwell, with a book called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. I don't remember buying this CD series. I don't remember how it got in there. Maybe someone gave it to me. I don't remember, but I remember looking over, and I have this long drive ahead of me. Thought, I'll put it in. I didn't know who John Maxwell was, the whole thing. Man, this guy just kind of started rewiring my brain. It's kind of what I'm saying
Yeah.
with your audience. Like, you can start listening to stuff that like all of a sudden changes the way you look at the world, right?
Yeah.
And so he is saying to me, like, these 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, starting to like raise up my leadership level. So that led to that, just studying more of his books and watching more of his, talks and so on. And then I was invited a number of years ago. This is a really good, important lesson for all of us. So invited years ago to be part of a small event. I think it was called Elite. I think the event was called Elite. Anyway, it was kind of a small group of people from my profession, maybe 50 or something like that. And to have a whole day with John, right, where he would
Yeah.
teach and train, but it was in an intimate room. And I think it was $5,000. And at the time, $5,000 was highly significant to me. That was
Yeah.
that amount of money mattered, for sure. And I remember like really thinking, do I want it? By the way, it was not, as you know, not just $5,000 for the ticket. Then you got an
Right.
airfare and your hotel and the food and away from your career and the whole thing. So in other words, it was a $10,000,
Yeah.
all in kind of thing. And I just was like, okay. And I went back and forth and finally I was like, I'm going to go do it. Well, that kind of got me into his orbit.
Mm.
And my friends, you want to invest money into you. Like people ask me all the time, what's the best investment I can make? Should I invest in real estate? Should I invest in like, you know, uh, stock market? Should I invest in oil? Should I invest in gas? Should I invest in cryptocurrency? Like, what's the best thing to invest in? The very best thing you can invest in, the very best investment you'll ever make is in yourself. You want to be investing in your mind, investing in your circle, investing in your learning. You want to invest dollars into your brain, into your skill sets.
Yeah.
And anyway, so that one led to the next thing, that led to the next thing. And I've done now, been to Costa Rica with him multiple times doing these country transformations. I took my son to one of them. He and my son have had this really, really kind of beautiful, powerful connection with each other. And he's become someone that I really look at as a mentor and, even as a friend. And so I was super honored and humbled that he would do the forward for my book.
Yes. Well, Justin, I appreciate you sharing your story and your journey and just all the amazing things you've accomplished. And thank goodness your dad, 2 days after that loss said, go get a job, man. The turnaround's been quick, but excited to see you continue in your journey. And hopefully we'll be able to do this again here in the next, couple of years as you just continue to,
Let's do it. Happy to
succeed
anytime,
more and
brother.
more.
Happy to anytime. I appreciate you having me on.